Removed because it's time for another presentation on land acquisition laws. And we have with us our next speaker who has been teaching at the Savitribai Phule Pune University since the year 2001. In fact, her research interests include issues related to local governance, aspects of political economy, including land acquisition, institutional economics, as well as international trade. We're just going to have our team to very quickly remove the chairs as well because it's a presentation. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker in fact has taught development economics as well as political economy of India and public economics at the Department of Economics, Savitribai Phule Pune University. So it's time to invite on stage our next speaker. Can we please have a huge round of applause to welcome on stage Ms. Dhanmanjiri Sathe. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I would like to begin by thanking the organizers for inviting me because I'm a 100% academician and I always look forward to opportunities where I can be with the people who are in real life, so to say. Now, I'm also very happy to see some of my old friends here, some of my students here, and also the new friends that I've made in the last 1.5 days. When you have a session, when you have an event as big as this, I suppose there are some slippages, and the topic on which I'm going to talk really is the sustainable compensation for spaces or land. Okay, now this phrase, sustainable compensation, is somewhat unusual, because that is not a phrase which is usually used. So I'll start by explaining what I mean by this. Next one. Yeah.
This one, the green button?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'll just start by the time they put it. No, it's gone to the next one before this. I'm sorry because I've got a bit of a bad one between that and this. इसके बीच में इसके बाद एक है. हाँ, thank you. And how do I do it? इससे ना? This green. This one. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm a bit sorry because I have got a bad throat, but that is all. Is it possible to have sustainable compensation for spaces or land? And I will start by defining what I mean by sustainable. And I say that sustainable is a process that does not come under threat immediately or nor in the future. Obviously, this means that non-sustainable acquisition is when you have some kind of immediate or in the future non-viability. Usually it happens because of agitations and protests. And now we are entering, we have been having a lot of technical speakers. And now we will be entering somewhat softer areas where we'll be looking at the political economy of having urbanization and acquisitions. So when we talk about these things, we immediately think about agitations and protests. So what I'm going to be speaking about is, can we have acquisitions that do not lead to any kinds of acrimonious reactions? Now, based on my research work, what I have found is that yes, it is not impossible to have sustainable compensation packages in India. Now, when you look at the word acquisition, it raises the images of bloodshed, repression, and violence which is there. And we have examples of Nandigram Shingur. Recently in Bhangar, which is a village in West Bengal, there were 2 people who were killed. And we also have examples of Bhatta Parsul in UP. Then we also think of agitations against dams, where the most important agitation was the Narmada Bachao Andolan. And it was a long agitation, but one of the advantages of this agitation was that the World Bank accepted to include the costs of rehabilitation and resettlement in the project cost. So that is one thing which was achieved because of this agitation. Now, here we will stick basically to acquisitions which are there for industrialization and urbanizations. And of course, some of the insights would be used for infrastructure projects also. Now, in spite of agitations and oppression which has happened, what we see in real world is that a whole lot of industrialization, etc., has happened in the last 20 years or so. And a whole lot of has actually happened quite peacefully. There are certain areas in India where it has happened very peacefully, and the examples would be, say, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, and NCR, that is a national capital region, which is Delhi and Gurgaon and certain parts of UP. So what we ask here is, what are the things that were done right in these areas? Which brings us to the next issue, that is, what are the things that make good political and economic sense when we are acquiring areas or spaces? Now, what I have found based on my research work is that farmers are not actually against giving up their spaces per se. And you have an NSSO report which was there in 2005, where around 40% of the farmers said that they were not interested in doing farming because the farming has become quite unviable, and I'm sure there would be people who would be challenging me on this issue. After 2005, the government has stopped asking this question. But what the farmers actually want is they want to have what we call the sustainable compensation. The other thing that I can mention here is that when I was looking at the overall history of acquisition, I found that it can be divided into two parts. The first thing is the traditional phase, which starts in 1950 and goes on till 1991, where actually in the socialist phase, the government has asked the farmers to make a lot of sacrifices. The agitations have been crushed, and the compensation which was paid was very low. So it is actually a period where the farmers were exploited the most. Then I am talking about the civil society phase, which starts in 1991 and continues up till now, and it has got some features. And the first feature is that the acquisitions and high rate of growth feed into each other because they need each other. If you want to have high rate of growth for the economy, you need to acquire spaces at very high rate, and spaces would be acquired at higher rate if the industrialist feels that, okay, in the future, he can expect higher rate of growth for his industry. So, there is a two-way kind of a relationship between the rate of growth and the rate of acquisition. The second thing is that over a period, we find that the compensation packages have really improved. And I'll speak about it in two minutes or so. And thirdly, what you say is that the media, and especially the electronic media, is playing an extremely important role. The farmers have said to me that if the electronic media had not been there, we would have been killed. There is a strand in academics which thinks that the electronic media is actually sensationalizing things, but my experience shows that the farmer is extremely happy with the kind of coverage which he has been getting. So with this kind of a background, we speak about exactly the things which are required if we want to have sustainable compensation packages. The first thing that I have found is that there should be flexibility of approach from both the sides, which means that from the side of the acquiring agency and from the side of the farmers as such. Now, I'll just give some examples. There is this Mahendra Says, which is close to the city of Jaipur. In the earlier phases, the farmers said that, okay, we are happy with the 15% being, they were happy with the 15% of the area being given back to them. After 2.5 years, what they found is that 15% is not enough. So they agitated, the government said yes, they increased it. So here what you see is that both the sides have been flexible. You also see in this village called Maan, which is just behind Hinjawadi on Mumbai-Pune road, the phase 4, the first 3 phases went off well. When there was phase 4, the farmers have agitated, and the MIDC has said that, okay, we will not really acquire any areas from the phase 4. Again, you see that there is some kind of a flexibility. The third example is with respect to the Chakan Airport, which is extremely interesting. Chakan Airport, for people who know about it, has been, it's an issue which has been going on for around 20 years or so. And it was said that there would be an airport which would be built close to the village of Chakan. The farmers were agitating there. The agitations were sometimes severe, sometimes they were not so very severe. Just 4-5 months back, the chief minister announced that, okay, the airport would be shifted to another village, which is the village of Purandar. Now, once this announcement was made, what you see is that the same farmers are now agitating to have the airport where it was expected to be. You know, so that is something which is very interesting. So you should, I mean, we should remember as such that the farmers are not really giving up their areas as such. What they're interested in is, again, they're interested in sustainable compensation package, which is there. Now, the second thing which we need to do here is that the acquiring agency must sit down and negotiate with the farmers. Even if the acquiring agency has the power of eminent domain, which means that it is legal for the acquiring agency to acquire the area which is there, but it should not have that kind of an arrogance or, you know, some kind of an arrogance which is there. And it is not about taking that area because you have a legal system which supports it. The whole idea should be, you should sit down with the farmers and talk to them. And it may seem very simple, but it is not something which happens all the time. The example again would be the Bangar case in West Bengal, which just happened 4-5 months back. 2 people were killed there, which seems absolutely unessential when we look at the history of acquisitions in some of the other states. The third thing is that the urgency clause should never ever be used. Unless there is a genuine urgency or emergency like floods or earthquake or a war, it is absolutely silly to use something like this, and the Supreme Court has also struck it down in the case of Greater Noida. So it is also something which the acquiring agency should not be doing. After that, what we see is that, you know, we have spoken, or the earlier speakers have spoken about the market price of land. What I think is that it's not really essential to be too much obsessed about the market price. Economists have spent a lot of time in talking about what exactly is a market price, but as most of us are aware here, market price in any case is quite inaccurate in India. So the businesses who are wanting to acquire those spaces need to give much more as monetary compensation. Because if they want it to work, then what they need to do is to give much higher amounts. Because, you know, in any case, I think my interactions with the businesses have shown that now the businesses have sort of accepted that the earlier model will not work. They will have to pay higher amounts by way of compensation. And for them, you know, the businesses are always facing things like increase in price of oil, increase in price of iron, increase in price of steel. So this is again a case which is where the price of an input has increased, and ultimately they will be shifting it to the consumer, which means that the TVs or the toothpaste which we are consuming will become somewhat more expensive than what they were earlier. So businesses should also think of, you know, paying higher amounts of monetary compensation so that in the future there are no agitations with respect to the monetary compensation which the farmers have got. The fifth thing which I have found out is that how inelastic is the demand of the buyer with respect to that particular area. It is a matter of simple demand and supply in economics. If the buyer is absolutely desperate to buy a certain space, it makes sense that the seller would ask for a higher price. If you just do an experiment, a mental experiment, and if you think of a situation where the entire back office of Hollywood animation were to shift to India, okay, then I can just think of 4 or 5 spaces which they would be interested in making investments. So it could be areas close to Bangalore, maybe close to Pune, close to Mumbai, and maybe in the NCR region. So if something so important is going to be shifting to India, what you see is that the buyer will be willing to pay much higher price than what is given by, say, just the market value, or things like whether that area is irrigated or no, whether it's 1 crop, 2 crop, 3 crop. All these things are not really important when the buyer is really wanting to buy that land and he values it at a very high rate. So this is something which should be included when the final compensation package is made. I think in the case of Mahamumbai Says, which was a very high-profile says because it was supported by the Mukesh Ambani group. One of the important reasons why it has failed is that the compensation which was paid to the farmers was not really in tune with the desperation with which that company was interested in taking that peri-urban areas, which is so very close to Mumbai. It was something which was not really factored in. Then what you see is that other thing is the future appreciation of the land. And this is the most important thing, which is that the farmers think that you take areas from us, you buy it from us in acres, and afterwards you sell it in square feet. And we don't get any future appreciation which the buyer gets afterwards. So what is essential if you want to have some kind of a sustainable compensation package is that the buyer will have to return a part of the developed area that he or she has taken. And we have a lot of examples here. I've already talked about the Mahendra Says. Then there is example of the Navi Mumbai Airport model, where the areas have been returned to the farmers. And, future appreciation is a very important factor for the farmers. Now the farmers have also become quite market savvy, and they know what happens to the price of the areas which have been acquired afterwards. So in some senses, they have to be given a share into the future appreciation of the areas which have been acquired. And finally, one can say that there should be no need to use any kind of repression by the state. It is really a case of very bad politics. And you can see that it has not really happened in states like Gujarat or Maharashtra, which are quite developed and have better ways of dealing with the agitations which are there. Now, finally, what I'd like to say is that the process of acquisition should not be a mechanical process. And we also need to remember that the farmer is losing a very important style of his life. In the morning, we had Mr. Grease making a very technical presentation, but I was quite impressed by one sentence which he said, which was that he said that when you take space from someone, you're taking a part of his life. And I think it's a very important statement. Someone like me or us here who have been urban people for, say, around 200 years or so, we don't understand, or at least I didn't understand when I started with my research work, the importance which the farmer actually gives to that area which he's owning. It's not that he's not interested in, he's not interested in shifting to anything else, but it still means a whole lot of things to a farmer. So for that, we need to pay. In other words, if someone is valuing something very highly and if we want it, it makes sense that we should pay for it. We should put ourselves in that kind of a situation, and we should be humble about it. So I could have titled my talk as, "It is the compensation stupid." If you want to have some kind of a peace where all the parties are happy, then we need to have more of sustainable compensation packages. And what does this consist of? The first thing is that monetary compensation should be there, and the farmer who is getting that amount should be counseled, because he's not used to such high amounts which are being paid. So he should be told how it should be invested, because every family has got a different profile. You have a number of boys, number of girls, number of old people in the family. So, each and every farmer's family needs to be counseled, and you should have good NGOs actually helping the farmers in doing proper investment. And it's also important because it has been found that the farmers can spend the amount in alcoholism or spending it on prostitutes. So it is something which has happened. So it is something which needs to be avoided. And of course, the monetary compensation should be in the joint account with the farmer and his wife, because there are issues involved like the property rights, inheritance rights, and the fact that you know, the females in the families have got right over some amount of spaces, but as soon as it becomes monetary compensation, it is only the male who starts using it. And usually you find that a whole lot of money gets wasted. So we need to be very careful when huge amounts of monetary compensation is paid. The second thing is with respect to giving the developed areas back. There are two advantages here when we give it back. First of all, the farmer has a house to stay, which otherwise he may not have. And the second thing is he and his family can start a non-agricultural activity on that area which he's got, which increases his income, which increases his economic opportunities, and which also makes him feel that, okay, he's outside the farming area and he is now getting into the modern sector as such. So it is important that the area which has been developed, a certain percentage of it should be returned. And I was very happy to learn from some of my friends yesterday that there is a place called Khalapur, which is very close to Mumbai. And there the area which is being given back is around close to 60% or so. It is absolutely unheard of. It is very high percentage which is being returned to the farmers, and it is something which will make the farmers happy, and it can be sort of done at other places also. And finally, what I think is that giving of jobs, which has become such an important issue, is not really feasible. It should not be promised because, first of all, it is something which is not easily done. And there can be whole lot of reasons which are there. You know, the farmers may not have the skills to work in those kinds of companies which are set up there. There could be politics with the people from that village working in working in the factory in the same area. I don't think you can actually force the companies. No one has really gone to the court about it, but if one were to go to the court, I don't think it will stand in the, according to our constitution, that you're forcing companies to take certain people. And finally, the thing is that from one family as such, you just say that, okay, one person will get a job, but what about the other people in the family? You know, there are 2 or 3 brothers. At best, you can give a job to one person, but what is it that happens to the other people in that family? So I think that jobs are not feasible. They should not be asked. It is not a good idea at all. But we should concentrate on giving higher monetary compensation and developed land back, which I think is quite feasible. Now, you know, the farmers actually face a very paradoxical situation. If they say that I'm not interested in selling the area's land at all, then they know that their situation remains as before, which is not very good, which is even if their areas are irrigated and things like that, because it means that they will always remain farmers, their incomes will be low. But however, if they accept to sell, then what they fear is that they will lose everything. You know, they want to sell, but they're scared of sort of making that sale or taking that leap. So it is the responsibility of the system to support the farmer in making that psychological and material transition. And I would like to say thank you with this.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We'll open the floor for questions. Sorry.
Madam, you've talked on a very important topic. You mentioned here that acquisition of land should actually be based on a basic demand for it. As far as the MRTP Act is concerned, which actually gives rise to the special planning authorities like SIDCO and other such authorities, MIDC and all that. Here is a very tricky question. You also mentioned, as some of the speakers mentioned earlier, to take land from a farmer is you're reaching to his heart. You're taking something away from him. Now, whom are you giving this land to? It's being given for development, mostly for housing.
Or industrialization, infrastructure.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now, is there any regulatory authority which sees what is this basic demand? Because all the properties that are built upon are not necessarily occupied and used. much of it goes into investment. So if we are a civilized people, and if survival of the fittest is looked upon in a different way, money is as good as a gun.
As good as a?
Gun.
Okay.
In the Western world, when the migrants went to the American lands, they shot down the Native Americans with a gun and they took their land. Now here, if there are people who are affluent and who have got a lot of money, do they constitute that proportion of people who form that so-called need? To what proportion is it? To what proportion is the land actually be given to people for their own housing, which is actually the need? Now here again, as we know in our country, the population is very high, as in China. There are many developed nations which have got a negative population growth, and they are dying. Those civilizations are dying. It has been coming in the news off and on that many of the Western countries are no longer going to be what they are. The point here is, in our country, which is so vast and still growing, how do we calculate the land? What is the point of us going to be overpopulated? It's still a long way to go, but just something on how is this regulation being done to see what is this actual need? What percentage goes into investment and what percentage goes into the actual need for the people to occupy? Thank you.
Actually, if I've understood you rightly, you can't just say what is the need as such, because the need is dependent on the price itself. You know, if you want a thing, I mean, okay, we're just talking about a good X. So you want, say, 20X if the price is Y. But if the price becomes 2Y, your need, your demand will become half. So you can't just talk about need in isolation of the price, is what I would say. So even the kind of investment which is happening, like, you know, I suppose you're talking about only about housing. And I was actually more talking about industrial estates and things like that. But even if you're talking about housing, if the price is high, what you'll find is that the need will fall. So one will have to reach a point where the demand becomes equal to supply. So what the farmer is asking should be affordable to the buyer also. So that is the other part of the story. I don't know whether I answered you, or we could talk about it outside, because there are a lot of hands going up, yeah.
All right, so what we'll do is a quick request to everybody. Let's keep our questions very crisp, and sir, you have the mic, so please shoot.
All right, I'll try and stay as crisp back. And my name is Satvik, I'm an economist. Your entire argument essentially boils down to have a nice framework. I mean, I'm casting it in economics terms. Have a nice framework where you have a nice, solid bargaining process, and you share the differences between valuations such that both parties are better off from where they started. Now, standard bargaining theory, standard game theory tells you that the bargaining outcome can be very different depending on a plethora of factors. If you have, if the buyer is large and there are many small sellers, then the outcome is closer to what the buyer wants. If people don't know what the valuations are, incomplete information comes into the picture, the person with the better information is better favored. So just keeping all this in mind, I want to just drill down slightly more into how this bargaining actually takes place according to what you found out. For instance, and I don't have any prior information to this, I apologize to people who already do, but when buyers bargain, do they bargain with individual landholders, or do they bargain with people, with a collective group?
So do you have like multiple questions or one question?
I'm asking for some specific details about the bargaining process, okay, and I'm just listing a few which I'd like her to elucidate.
Sure. Okay, sir.
Right, so the first is whether the bargaining is between sort of equal parties or between one buyer, many sellers. The second is in terms of revealing information. Does the government or anyone else step in to help, for instance, poor farmers evaluate what the buyer's evaluation is? So things like these. How exactly does the bargaining process take place?
I'll just give a very short answer, which is that up till now, this kind of a bargain is not very common in India. But, you know, along with the economic process, you also have a political process in India. So what ensures some kind of a power to the farmers is the local political power structures. So that is the way in which the farmers, who are a whole lot of in numbers, they will be able to bargain in a better way, because the buyer is one, as you're saying, and he is a powerful person. And you have a lot of people who are owning that land. But because of, hopefully, a well-functioning democratic system, what you'll get is that the farmers will be paid more and more, and that is exactly what we are seeing. Okay, because the compensation packages, like I've already said, are improving. And it is a result not really of economics, but of the political process, and also a result of the agitations. So agitations have been useful. We should not really look at agitations as something which have made the system dysfunctional. And for example, the kind of things which happened in Nandigram Singur, those kind of things have not happened after that. They happened in 2006. It is almost 11 years. So the political parties have also learned, because in that state, the CPM has completely been marginalized because of just one thing, which was handled so very poorly. So that is the way in which some kind of a equality with respect to power and the game theoretic approach about which you're talking will work to a certain extent.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to wrap up the session. I know I'll face some agitation from our audience, but please do understand, we are completely running out of time. Firstly, ma'am, we'd like to thank you for your fantastic presentation. Can we have a round of applause? And I'd like to invite on stage Ms. Priyanka and Ms. Dimple, who are the AVP for Business Development and Marketing with Gazania Shelters, to please come on stage and to please honor ma'am by presenting a memento. Thank you once again, ma'am. I'm sure you'll be flooded with a lot of questions, so I'm going to request them to please connect with you offline as well. Thank you once again.